Hello, welcome. Apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. I will call this meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. We have all of us present here: Nick Poloni, myself, Dana Powers, Ted Gergen, Jack Nicolai, and Steve Brown. Administration present, we have Dr. Valenza and Marquez Guzman. And will the others be joining us remotely? Okay, so we'll see the rest remotely. Stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion on the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Steve Brown, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries. President's report. I do not have anything to report at this time. And clerks, any correspondence?
I have nothing to report as well.
Great. Okay. And Ted.
Oh, all right. Let's talk money. I will present the treasurer's report dated June 2021. So if we take a look, I'll present the ending balances in each account, the grant asset totals. So if we take a look at general fund cash account, it has an ending balance of $276,645.80. Credit cards, $10,981.28. EBC Flex and HRA cash account, $7,562.96. Capital Improvement Fund with a balance of $413,653.90, $400 in petty cash, and LGIP with $2,551,123.12. And that gives us a grand asset total for June of 2021 of $3,260,367.06. Any questions at all on any of that?
No.
I'd like to move to approve the treasurer's report dated June 2021 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries.
All right, and we'll take a look at the payment of accounts payable bills from June 17th, 2021 through July 22nd, 2021. Those include checks numbered 70329 through 70416 and 202000917 through 202100009 for a total checks of $801,167.27.
Marquez, is the Eckhart, is that all 1 month?
So they had a slip up again. So it does include.
I think we all saw it. We're like,
I was
yes.
wondering, maybe they just.
No, they did have a slip up. We did talk to them again, and they promised us they'll do it on a monthly basis moving forward.
So is this 2 months? Or is
I think it might be 2.5 months, but it's more than 1 month. So
I don't want to say anything because I figured that you're like, okay, yeah.
well, as soon as
take it from you?
I saw that there weren't any invoices from Eckhart. I was like, oh great, no invoices, in May, and then June comes around, and yep,
So close.
yeah, yep. And as soon as I saw it, I said, oh, I know that's going to come up at the board meeting.
At least it's in this year,
Yes,
That's true.
yeah.
this fiscal.
How long is your contract with them?
We don't have a long-term maintenance contract with them.
More on a needed basis.
Other questions for Marquez or myself? All right, I'd like to move to approve the accounts payable bills from 6/17/21 through 7/22/21.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries.
Thank you.
We have the minutes of the regular school board meeting, 6/22/2021, as printed and/or amended.
I motion to approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting dated 6/22/2021 as printed and/or amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
And then we have minutes of the special school board retreat work session on 6/30/2021 as printed and or amended.
I motion to approve the minutes of the special school board meeting or school board retreat / work session 6/30/2021 as printed and or amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in,
Dueling seconds.
who wants it?
Put it in the middle. I second.
Go ahead, Jack.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion
You
carries.
guys are gonna fight. You know.
Yes, arm wrestle later.
Comments?
Yes. Okay, so understand if this is a little bit confusing for this particular month, but since the pandemic started, we have had public comments submitted by 4 p.m. the day before. So we do have a stack that were submitted for that. And what I will do is go through each one. There's one in particular that most likely I'll need to stop at the 3-minute mark, as that's what is allocated for each of the written comments. And then I'll just have a timer going for that. And we'll go from there. So we'll see you guys in a couple minutes. Okay, to the Salem School District, I've included a letter attached. My daughter will be entering I don't read the top one, do I? It's not,
let's
her name
do-
isn't mentioned, right? Okay,
But you would read the name and address of the person.
got it, okay. It's just both letters, got it, okay. My daughter will be entering kindergarten next year. We homeschooled this year due to lack of choices for parents in regards to masking in school. Please review my letter and documentation and let me know if you have any further questions and when a good time I could meet with you all or attend a board meeting in the future to further discuss as needed. Thank you, Ashley Bloomfield. June 2nd, 2021, School Board of Salem, Wisconsin. The purpose of this letter is to implore you to consider parental choice for the 21-22 school year as it relates to COVID planning. A tenet of the school board is to protect children, which is also shared with parents, and our rights to protect and make decisions for our children. A balance can and should be obtainable. COVID-19 school guidelines are created by the CDC in each state, country, and municipality are making decisions at their local levels. No singular blueprint exists to combat COVID, but data has been tending to show that states without mask mandates are faring better than states with them still in place. Items to consider as they relate to COVID, masks, and children. Number 1, the CDC has flip-flopped on its own position several times since March of 2020, including the use of masks. Number 2, the CDC is now recommending that children wear masks all day long in school. Subpoint A, is that how you say this? Subpoint A, there's not been a long-term study on this practice to realize negative impacts. For example, point number 1, how is development impacted by not seeing facial expressions? How is language speech impacted by not seeing the mouth move? How does a child easily notice emotions like anger, sadness, happiness, fear? What is the emotional impact of being in a mask all day? What are the long-term health impacts of wearing masks all day? Point number 3, children have a greater than 99.99% recovery rate. Number 4, COVID is almost entirely transmitted by adults. Subpoint A, almost 60% of COVID cases in school children come from the age of 18 to 24 age group. Number 5, we are close to being back to fully maskless. Subpoint A, we can shop maskless indoors around other people. We can dine maskless indoors and around other people. Our kids all play together indoors while maskless. Neighbors gather maskless indoors. As parents, we weigh risk versus reward when making medical and protective decisions for our kids. The medical benefit, i.e. risk versus reward, is in question for masks, and it should be a parental decision to make. In past pandemics, parents were trusted to make responsible choices for their children. The presence of a novel virus that barely affects children is no reason to remove parental choice. Children have already been exposed to unprecedented amounts of fear, instability, shaming, psychological trauma, and segregation through the COVID measures, and are even more suggestible that their developmental stage would usually entail. We urge you to consider the potential areas of malfaceted damage that can harm our children by forcing mask wearing. It is the job of parents or legal guardians, not others with influence on children, to make medical decisions for them. Thank you for your, was that 3 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, so that's good. Just thank you for your time and then provided some additional information. Okay.
Do you have the name and address on that?
There it is. I didn't see that. It was in blue. Okay. That was Ashley Bloomfield, 23600 115th Street, Trevor, Wisconsin, 53178. I see it now. It's in blue. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I love that. All right. Number 2. This is Erica Hipper, 6057 240th Avenue, Salem, Wisconsin, 53168. To whom it may concern, Salem Consolidated School Board. My name is Erica Hipper. She has a child in 6th grade and 3rd grade, and I wanted to address the issue of face masks going forward for next year. Just to give you some perspective that I am not only a concerned parent, I am also a registered nurse, and I have been working with COVID patients on an acute care floor at the hospital ever since this all started, and my unit was converted to the COVID unit. While COVID has literally been the center of my world for the past year, I am an avid advocate for measures to prevent the spread of the virus. I have never been a strong supporter to the mass use of masks, especially for children, even though I understand the reasoning behind it. The reason I disapprove is when masks are not worn as they were originally intended, a new mask with every encounter that is completely sealed around the nose and mouth, worn for a short period of time without being touched and then thrown away. When this is not done, the negative consequences outweigh the benefits. Those who advocate for masks are blinded to the realities of mask wearing. The surgical masks used this year were designed to prevent saliva and large bacteria particles. Or parles?
Partials.
Partials. Got it. That are present in a person's mouth from being transmitted to the patient's surgical site. They are also used in droplet isolation rooms for conditions such as the flu and pneumonia that are transmitted in droplets emitted while coughing and sneezing. Did you notice not many people got the flu this year? While they are extremely effective for saliva and other large particle microbes, they are only 30% effective against the transfer of all microorganisms. Cloth masks are only about 15% effective at stopping aerosolized particles. Was that 1 or 3?
1.
Okay, cloth face masks have some effect against particles that are larger than 2.5 microns, but COVID is between 0.05 and 0.2 microns. That's 10 to 50 times smaller than the particles they are effective against. This is a reason the hospitals use N95 masks for COVID patients. N95s are 95% effective at containing small aerosolized microorganisms. Holy smokes. And then she cited a source. Okay, this is not even my issue though. If it was, I would promote the continued use of masks for any benefits they give. The issue comes in with the extended use and reuse of masks. Masks are intended to be used once for a short amount of time and then thrown away. The longer a mask is worn, the less effective it becomes and the more it becomes contaminated. Masks that are contaminated with microorganisms are a health problem. First, that was 3?
Yep.
Holy smokes. Whoa, I barely got fired off. Okay. I believe the board received this one in particular, right? I don't think we received this one. Yes, we did. Sorry. So some of these were submitted directly to the board as well, which we received, and I've responded to each one that we received to individually. So just so you know, the board did receive some of these as well, potentially. Okay, next. Philip Bloomfield, 23600 115th Street, Trevor, Wisconsin, 53179. Okay. Hello. I would be attending the next board meeting in person to speak, but I will not be in town. As an alternative, I'm sending you this email to ask the school board to consider allowing for parental choice of the upcoming school year as it relates to wearing of masks. I wish I could be there in person to have a meaningful, respectful dialogue with you all. Hopefully this email suffices in my absence. The last CDC result I could find specific to children's COVID statistics is from April 21, and the COVID death rate for kids is 0.009034%. 271 out of over 3 million. Of these deaths, the numbers aren't clear if any actual died from just COVID alone versus having other medical conditions. I looked to see how this compares to other death rates and found, according to NHTSA.gov, stats tracked from 06 through current times show that an average of 131 deaths happen nearly yearly from school bus accidents. According to CDC.gov, their childhood injury report shows that 12 million kids go to the emergency room yearly, of which around 12,000 die. According to weather.gov, 49 people die yearly from getting struck by lightning. That sucks. According to the CDC.gov, stats tracked from 05 show that yearly deaths from the flu have ranged from 37 to 199. When I put these in perspective, I realize that my kids have almost the same chance of dying from COVID as they do getting struck by lightning. Before any parent makes a decision for their child, they do a risk analysis. To me, I see great value for my kids not wearing a mask as compared to the extremely low chance they could die, such as they're able to, 1, see facial expressions for emotional development and social interaction, 2, see mouth movements for language development, 3, know what their teacher, other faculty, and their classmates look like, 4, breathe freely during the day, 5, not be burdened by a mask, 6, not be exposed to excess CO2 or other bacteria in the mask for prolonged times. Note, some studies have been released on these topics and how they can adversely affect health and cognitive abilities. 7, not have the discomfort of a mask. As parents, our natural instinct is to protect our kids, and this is why I'm reaching out to you. I realize you're trying to accomplish the same thing in protecting the kids. Parents who wish that their children wear a mask should be able to make that decision, even if there is no mask mandate. Inversely, parents who wish that their child not wear a mask should have that ability as well. Daily, parents decide things for their kids around topics such as diet, exercise, medication, religion, values, morals, which kids to allow their kids to play with, where they can have sleepovers, what time to be home, etc. Allowing parents to make the choice for masks for their kids falls in line with regular parental choices that we should be making. Thank you for taking the time to read my email. Sincerely, Philip Bloomfield. Oh, I finished that one. Okay. What's that? Just Eric and Christine Pelly, 7722 256th Avenue, Salem, Wisconsin, 53168. Okay, we are in strong favor of mask choice being left to the family with no mask mandates for this school year. Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Made it.
Oh, sure. Dear, William Pelly. Oh, wait. Okay. William Pelly, 23740 84th Street, Salem, Wisconsin, 53168. Dear Salem Board, my name is William Pelly. Oh, I already read his address. I will have 4 kids that are eligible to attend Salem Elementary School this year, kindergarten, 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. My wife and I love Salem Elementary, the teachers and staff. Unfortunately, we had to homeschool last year. I am lucky that I have an amazing wife who made last year a productive one for our kids. That's great. Our decision to come back is based in large part on mask mandates. We believe in individual liberty and individual responsibility. We teach that to our children. We believe there is enough information out there for individuals to make their own choices about masks. Also, any staff who wants to get the vaccine is able to get it. For this reason, we encourage the board to vote to leave mask mandates up to individual families and to not force masks at all. Respectfully, William. And last but not least, Aaron Lina, 24421 88th Street, Salem, Wisconsin, 53168. Hello, I am emailing in advance of tonight's meeting to voice my support of removing the mask mandate for the upcoming school year, but rather leave it to individual families to choose. We chose to homeschool this past year, and we are hoping to be able to send our kids into the classroom again. Thank you for your time, Aaron Lina. Perfect. Thank you for those. You will see why they came in later in the agenda.
So the first action item on the agenda is to address the beginning of the year, 2021, 2022 COVID safety protocols. And like I've always done, I kind of give an update in terms of where we're at and the information we have going into making these types of decisions.
Screen reader for Chrome OS. Pixel, press this Facebook.
Okay. So as you take a look, you're used to kind of seeing the heat map, which is the top map. You can see that things have cooled down considerably in the Salem Lakes, kind of Paddock Lake area. Remembering where you see more of the red is where there's a higher incidence per capita of infections, so pretty cool. This is, though, going back to July 18th, so, you know, there's been some time since then. You can also see on the graph below, we're still pretty significantly low in terms of numbers of infections, especially off of that peak. We're still well down into that kind of yellow area, which suggests that there isn't a need for widespread kind of mandate type mitigation efforts. Again, that can change at any time, but that's where we're at as of the last update I got from Kenosha County. Just to give you a little bit of additional information, I think one of the things that is at least interesting as a part of the conversation is the level of vaccination. So you can see, for example, the village of Paddock Lake right now among people eligible is at about 39%. The village of Salem Lakes is at about 37% in terms of vaccinated from people who are eligible for vaccination. You can see that there is a slight uptick in the number of cases being identified, but not anywhere near where they were back, last spring, for example. However, if you read the newspaper tonight, it does say that Wisconsin hit a high again of 1,000 cases. The last time we had that number was back in April. So definitely the trend is going up.
For the whole state?
For the state, yes. Yep. So just a couple little items before we go into the administrative recommendation. It's important to understand that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continues to evolve with new variants and can change rapidly. Students under the age of 12 are not eligible at this point for the vaccine. There is some talk that that may change, but it likely will not be till the end of the year. As you probably saw in the news today, the CDC recommends masking for all students and adults in areas of high risk, regardless of vaccination status when indoors. They have also recommended masking for all students, regardless of whether they are in an area of high risk or not. One of the things that I believe the board asked me to do is to get some legal advice in terms of any actions that are taken. So legal counsel has been pretty clear that the district needs to put reasonable safeguards in place to protect staff and students, and that would then prevent the district from being negligent if there were some significant issues. Now, certainly agreement or disagreement as to what those reasonable measures are. Whatever decision is made tonight, the knowledge of state or national mandates could impact our procedures and protocols. We've seen that happen in the past. And then just to talk a little bit, we did hold some discussion at the Personnel Committee based on some of the survey results that we got from staff in making recommendations. So actually, this is picking up from my other page. So when we get into the actual administrative team recommendation, I think it's important to remember that this is just the administrative team's recommendation to the board. The board has full authority to change, to accept it as it is, to modify. Our plan would be that every effort would be made to space students 3 feet apart in the classrooms. That is going to be a little tighter than last year. Last year we had, we were closer in that 4 to 6 feet range. Masks would be strongly recommended, but voluntary for students. However, all students will be provided with masks. Again, strongly recommended, and that was clear language that came from our attorney, but allowing for parents to make the decision as to whether students actually wore those masks or not. Unvaccinated staff will continue to wear masks when working with students. The assumption will be that staff is unvaccinated unless they choose to show documented vaccination status. So in other words, there is no requirement for our staff to show us status, but when working with students, without that documentation of vaccination, we would require our staff to wear masks. Again, based on the fact that many of our students will not be vaccinated. Staff and students will be asked to self-screen and stay home if showing symptoms. Students will, this is different from this last year, will leave the classrooms for specials. But interaction between homerooms at the PK5 level would be limited to partner homerooms. So in other words, not a total mix-up, trying to keep still, not direct cohorts, but trying to limit the number of students that kids are interacting with.
Question. When you refer to PK5, which classes does that encompass?
So 4K, 5K, all the way up through 5th grade.
Fifth grade would still be held in their room in groups, which is what happened last year.
So they'd leave the classroom for specials. And interaction between the homerooms would be limited to partner homerooms. So not really any different than we have been doing things. So for example, a teacher may switch classes for science at a certain grade level and then stay in the homeroom for reading language arts. I think what you might be referring to would be more at the middle school level, where I'll get to that in a minute, where you'll see more kind of moving around.
Well, I'm, my one of my bugaboos is fifth grade band. Allowing the
So-
kids to come out with, this wouldn't allow it though, would it?
Yes, yes, it would.
It would.
So
Band
leaving
is a
the
special.
classroom for specials.
Correct.
So,
Our choir.
all right.
Yeah.
So art, music, last year we streamed those into the classroom. Now they would actually leave the classroom and go to those classes.
Thank you.
Okay?
You wanna
So-
wipe your brow?
Student homeroom mixing at the middle school level would be limited to 3 or 4. So in other words, every class period, you're not going to see a total mix-up. You'll see them kind of move in cohorts, maybe a cohort for English language arts and reading in homeroom, and then a cohort, for example, for math and science. So not wide open, but also not like this year where they were tied to one homeroom for the entire day. Student recess would be limited to 2 or 3 homerooms interacting, so again, not a total mix-up on the playground. We will no longer be quarantining entire classes unless directed specifically by the health department. Families will be notified if their child has been in close proximity, but families will make the decision as to whether to quarantine or not. So that is a change from the way we have done things in the past.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Let's say you have symptoms with a child similar to last year. Are you going to be required to go get a COVID test showing negative in order to come back?
Depending on the symptoms. And then the other side of that is we're working directly with the state where we will have rapid testing available, likely here at school. So that will assist our families, but certainly families can still make a decision at that point. If there's clear indicators of COVID symptoms, they can make the decision to have the COVID test at that time or withhold the student until the symptoms are mitigated. All right. We'll continue with the 4K, 5K drop-off just because I love doing that so much every day. No, we got really good feedback from our families on that, and so that is one thing we'll be continuing. We won't have the one up front here for first grade, but we'll maintain that 4K, 5K drop-off on that end of the building. But all the other grade levels will use the main entrance off of Highway AH. just a reminder over and above whatever decision is made this evening related to masking and the recommendation, the federal transportation masking order remains in effect on buses until September 13th. Could be renewed at that point, but that is a federal mandate that we would need to follow. But then just in terms of information for families, the district cannot implement social distancing on buses. But seating charts will be established to assist with contact tracing. So we will still be requiring seating charts, but just as last year, we can't guarantee social distancing on buses. Masks and shields with a higher level of protection will be offered to any staff that requests it. In the past, we used the higher level of masks for staff that were moving from room to room. In this case, because masks will no longer be mandatory for students, that does create some anxiety with our staff. And so for those staff that are looking for that higher level, for example, the KN95 mask, we will have them available for staff. We will be allowing occasional intermittent adult visitors. So somebody coming in to read, for example, to students, they will be expected to wear a mask and shield, again, because we can't vaccinate our students. If we have classroom volunteers that are here on a more regular basis, so we have like room parents, we'll be going back to allowing room parents. But any room parents, for example, or classroom volunteers working directly with students will be required to show proof of vaccination or wear a protective mask. Spectator events may resume with district administrator approval of safety plan, although capacity may be limited. So it could be the type of thing where we look at the capacity of a room and we operate on 50% capacity. But it does, at least initially, open up the possibility of allowing spectators into some of our activities, going back to potentially having, for example, a music concert or things like that. Okay. So my recommendation to the board, as you can see, would be to accept the administrative team recommendations related to COVID safety protocols. If making a motion, though, you could do a motion that would say to accept those with the following modifications. If there are things that you as a board wanted to change related to those administrative recommendations.
You guys talked about like what support will be provided for students that are at home, that are either symptomatic or quarantined, or is it going to be more like prior to COVID, where it's just sick day and then you catch up when you get back?
So depending on the amount of time, so if we're looking at significant amounts of time, like a week or a couple weeks along those lines, at this point what we're looking at doing is having one homeroom that will be able to stream. However, it won't be the typical streaming experience with the teacher streaming and talking. It'll basically be more of a recording of what's going on in the classroom. So it probably won't be interactive during the class period,
Sure.
But we'll have access to the instruction. So that's, at this point, that would be our plan. Again, as with anything, any of those plans can change based
right,
on
yep.
reality on the ground. So,
Related to that, when you, with all the things that are in the recommendation from the administrative team, if you could just briefly reiterate the importance in your discussions and also discussions of the board itself this past year of staying very much in tune with what is going on each and every minute of every day in terms of what comes down, let's say, from the Kenosha County Health Department and other entities.
I would say that is one of the things, and I think, so I had a little bit of a mess up on one of the slides. One of the significant aspects of this plan is that this would be the plan initially, and if we were to get to the point where we had 10 active infections within the school, so in other words, between staff and students, actual active infections, that's that kind of 10-day period, then we would call an emergency special board meeting to revisit protocols. And to put that into perspective, at our peak last year, Granted, that was with many protocols in place, but in our peak last year, we had 12 actual active infections at a time at our highest level. So the recommendation would be to continue with these safety protocols, but I don't want to send an inaccurate message out to families to say that this couldn't change and that based on information that comes from Kenosha County, based on, as I mentioned, state mandates or federal mandates. But from our own local perspective, we always talked about following the data on the ground. And so what this recommendation would include would be that if we reach that point of 10 active infections in the building, that we would call an immediate special board meeting to revisit these protocols. Now, does that mean the protocols change? Maybe not. But at least the importance, I think, of relooking at the data and reconsidering at that point.
Right, and that's
what the
something that we have
protocols
always done.
Yep.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to accept the administrative team recommendations related to COVID safety protocols as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion?
No, I'm good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. So in layman's terms, masks will be
Highly
voluntary,
recommended,
highly recommended,
Right.
but
but
still
not
voluntary,
mandated.
Optional.
optional.
Okay.
I probably should have prepared that ahead of time.
I think.
Thank all the administrative
Nailed it.
team
For students.
and
For
teachers and
students,
staff for
yes.
their input.
Right, so at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the board enacted an emergency policy that allowed board member participation in meetings via technology during that identified public health emergency. Under the emergency, I'm just going to read a little bit from what it says. Under an emergency situation where a community has been directed by the Regional Public Health Division to restrict public activities due to health concerns, board members may participate via technology in regular and special scheduled board meetings and committee meetings. In these situations, the district will allow the general public remote access to the board meeting proceedings conducted in open session. So similar to what we're doing now, we're streaming to the public. And then subject to the following limitations and as a privilege that may be withdrawn or limited at the discretion of the majority vote of the board, the Salem School District Board will permit individual board members to participate in board meetings and committee meetings from a remote location, with such privilege to include being counted in the quorum, requirement for the meeting, participating in discussion, etc. I'm bringing this back to the board to see if the board at this time would like to modify any aspects of that, topics to consider in any motion. Choosing to stream board meetings does not require a policy change. So let's say, for example, the board decided that we were going to move back and change. That wouldn't prevent us from continuing to stream. I think, for example, the board has felt that that has been beneficial for our community, has created transparency and access to board meetings. So changing this policy does not change that aspect of it.
Would the policy be changed and would it require a vote if we, in discussion, were to say that our next meeting would be in the LGI and there would be spacing for people to sit? Would that be a board policy change?
No.
Okay.
So what this refers to, this policy refers to the board being able to attend remotely.
Right.
We'll
I was referring to the
talk
last
about-
item there, where
Yep.
to hold the meeting.
So once we decide, though, that we're going to hold our meetings differently, then that raises other questions, like, for example, to allow or limit the number of people of in-person public observers. So again, let's say that we move to the LGI. Not that I think we would get that many, but what if we had 100 people? I mean, would we look to set a limit to say if there's 20 public observers, that's okay. If it's above 20, then we need to move to stream.
Historically, when we've had the idea that there would be possibility of more participation in the board meeting, we've always had the secondary idea that we'd hold it in a bigger space, such as the the gym
Stage,
or
the
whatever the case
cafeteria.
is. So,
That's only if we
yeah.
know.
Sure.
The question is if you're not aware.
right.
So, I mean, you might do a kind of a scenario where you allow the first 25 in and then you stream into the cafeteria under that situation, And then the other thing that you would discuss or may want to would be to talk about whether visitors would be required to wear masking at meetings. And then where to hold the meetings. So I guess I'm opening up the possibility that you may want to consider going back to holding meetings in the LGI. You may want to consider allowing the public to attend those meetings. This is one of those areas where I believe the board should make this decision, and that's why you don't see an administrative recommendation there.
I think we should be here in person.
Yeah,
And if you can't make it,
it's part of, right. I mean, that's personally how I feel too. I think it's, if we can watch the Milwaukee Bucks win a championship with 100,000 people outside cheering them on, I think we should be able to have some sort of normalcy in our building, and I get it, restrictions. As far as the face masking thing, I think it's important, similar to our local businesses, where the signs say, we assume that you're vaccinated, if you're not wearing a mask. I think we'd start getting into a little bit more of a civil liberty situation if we were to pursue any further than that. So, we got to just hold people to the trust on that particular situation personally. So, and I think, this is a tax-paid building right here. We got to allow the taxpayers to enjoy it a little bit too, like we get to, I suppose. So, right. It's just how I.
and at that point, there's no interaction with students.
Correct.
Right.
I think that's
Yeah,
the key.
totally.
It's
That
a different
there's not
different atmosphere.
Which is user common sense, people. That's it,
I
right?
wouldn't mind feeling a little safer in a situation like that. I mean, if we did take the meetings back to the LGI, the people in the audience, will have the hopefully common sense to mask up or to be vaccinated or to keep a distance. But I'd like to see the distance from the board remain pretty wide between where the board is sitting and where the visitors are sitting. Because I'd like, for my personal safety, I'd like to have that space.
It's generally always been pretty.
Yeah, haven't we usually had, we've usually have had,
There's a good
On the risers.
right, yeah.
And as long as we're up against the front wall, I don't see a problem.
So just so you know, I mean, at this point, you could just vote to kind of vacate this policy and then go back to the way we did things in the
We
past.
could always go back to this if we wanted.
But continue streaming, I think we all
I
agree,
think
right?
that's important.
That's not a
No,
policy.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a practice.
So
So
back
we're
to normal.
eliminating, yes,
Back to
this
normal, but
emergency
being-
So
policy.
if you were to kind of move back to normal, what you would do is you would make a motion to vacate this policy. This policy was set as an emergency policy only, and can be by board vote vacated at any time.
And brought back if
And brought back,
necessary.
yep.
And are we going to be setting parameters for those meetings? Are we going to say smaller crowds, more distance?
That would be
Then we'd have
at the
to-
discretion of the board.
Yeah, then we'd have to create something.
And then we would need a new policy, right?
Yep.
Or an amended policy.
I mean, just taking us back to where we were, we're not where we were. I mean, things are still slightly dangerous. So, we have to be conscious that there may still need to be some changes in order to make this open meeting thing happen, but it would allow visitors to come back in and see what we're doing if we did it right, and it might be safe.
So Con, you're asking for a motion on vacating this policy.
Vacating the policy,
And then we
and
have to
then
come up
if-
with practices of,
If you want to establish other practices that would come into play, you can do that. In my mind, there's a couple different ways to do that. One would be to recognize, as I mentioned earlier, that the district administrator related to activities or spectators could limit the capacity to say 50%. So you would take a look at the LGI, say what is the capacity of the LGI, and then determine what 50% of that capacity would be, And then that's your overflow. Once you reach that capacity,
Would it have to
then
be in a motion to allow you to be able to regulate that, or could that be assumed through the board?
It was actually approved in the last motion we made.
Oh, yeah, I guess, so we wouldn't have to make a special
Done.
motion.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I make a motion to vacate the emergency policy board member participation in meetings via technology during identified public health emergency.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and motion approved.
Okay.
so then that applies along with this is one of the other policies that went into place was to require public comments to be submitted as written comments. At this point, as you're making decisions about board meetings going further, a decision could be made to open it back up to public participation at board meetings, subject to the limits that were established in board policy a long time ago.
Can we do both? If they're submitted in writing by 4 and in person?
Yes.
Okay.
It does allow for written comments
I like that.
during public comment.
I think that's nice to be able to
Would that be
submit.
coming out of the clerk's report? Wouldn't those go to the clerk and have the clerk read it?
Not
And then
if it
public
says-
comments?
I think the clerk's report is more of like a
Considered to be
thank you
public
note,
commentary.
like if we provided some, you know.
I've seen it done both ways.
That also helps out people who
Yeah.
are maybe a little bit, speaking shy in front of
Sure.
the crowd. Right?
Yeah.
That's still a concern.
Yeah, and normally with the clerk's report over the history of the board, it's been when a letter is sent
It's like
to the board
board business.
versus board business versus public comment.
Got it.
And then just to clarify, because I think the question was raised a little earlier this evening, a board meeting is a public meeting. It's not a meeting of the public. And so to clarify, public participation in the board meeting at this point with this board has been only during that public commentary. So in other words, there isn't an opportunity at a random time based on a board meeting for public input. It's only during that public commentary portion.
And even then, it's not a Q&A. It's a
Correct.
public comment.
It's a comment, right?
Right, and there are elected boards when they have their meetings where board members do engage in conversation with members in the community over and above public comments, which is the board's decision to do that, but.
We'd have to
But I'm
do
glad
that
that
as
we
a
don't,
majority.
haven't done that.
I motion to vacate the emergency restriction of public comments to be submitted as only written comments.
Perfect. So moved.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and motion carries.
We're coming back.
So, back into the opening back up again. We have always said that we would continue to revisit outside group access to indoor facilities. And so some of the considerations that the board may want to take into account would be, obviously, the more we open up, there are additional building areas then to clean and monitor with limited supervision or ability to enforce safety protocols. Board has already approved community-based activities that support community health needs to return. The administrative recommendation at this point is to resume outside group access to indoor facilities with a safety protocol plan submitted and approved by the district administrator. So again, that would open it up to any outside groups, for example, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, some of our different traveling teams, that type of thing. But again, with the requirement that a safety protocol plan, like we did with, for example, Wisconsin Lightning or some of those type groups for outside activities, approved by the district administrator. And then administrative recommendation that outside group spectator events may resume at 50% capacity. Again, so having a basketball game, for example, taking a look at, or for example, a dance recital or any of those types of community events that may take place within the building, you would determine what the capacity of a space is and subject to a 50% capacity limit for those types of events.
Did we already approve fall sports? Did we do that
Just
last month?
volleyball, wasn't it? Did we approved?
That was just in the spring.
Oh, yeah.
Like, have we approved Cross
So
country or
my
soccer?
understanding was that we approved sports, middle school sport participation back at that time.
Okay, good.
So it wouldn't, at that point, it wouldn't have to be renewed with every
Oh.
sport.
Good, okay, even better.
I motion to approve outside group access to indoor facilities.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
Yay. So we have an action item of a resignation on the agenda. Megan Jankowski has been with Salem for 19 years, most recently as a second grade teacher. She's resigning due to personal reasons, position changes, and time demands. The recommendation would be to accept her resignation effective immediately and assess liquidated damages per her contract in the amount of $2,000 based on the signed contract requirements as presented.
I motion to accept Megan Jankowski's resignation request effective immediately and assess liquidated damages in the amount of $2,000 based on signed contract requirements as presented.
So moved.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed, abstain, and motion carries.
We have a new hire for a 4K position. This would be Brittany Borkowski. She has a bachelor's in early childhood education from UW-Milwaukee. She did student teaching in 4K at Indian Community School in Franklin, Wisconsin. The recommendation would be to approve a 1.0 FTE contract for the 2021-22 school year of not less than $43,500.
I move to approve a 1.0 FTE contract for Brittany Borkowski for the 2021-2022 school year of not less than $43,500.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
So we have an action item for a new hire for our library media and literacy interventionist. This was a position that we had filled and then it wasn't filled and then we went back out to fill it. We're excited to have Carrie Galley. She has a master's in reading from Carthage College, a BS in special education and elementary education from UW-Oshkosh. She comes to us with 22 years of experience with the Kenosha Unified in elementary education and special education. The recommendation would be to approve a 1.0 FTE. However, a 192-day contract, which includes 5 additional days for the 2021-22 school year of not less than $75,260.
I motion to approve a 1.0 FTE 192-day contract, which includes 5 additional days for Carrie Galley in the 2021-2022 school year of not less than 75,260 days. Or $75,260.
That's a lot of
I
days.
just fallen Connie on this.
How many years that is? Gosh.
A long time.
I'd like to see somebody who'd sign that contract.
Pass.
Second it.
It's like 190 years.
Does that maybe need to be
Really touched
You wait,
restated?
Connie. It's coming for you.
Do we
Yeah, that
work-
would take some big negotiation.
do we restate that motion maybe and just?
No,
Just-
maybe just the number.
Just, yeah, $75,260.
Dollars, not days.
Yeah,
Got it.
days.
You got that, Diane? Okay, good.
That would have been 206 years.
You just came off like that.
Math man.
Okay, good job. Got it.
That's impressive. I believe we got a second from
Yes.
Ted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
Then we have a transfer into the math intervention position. Craig Ballou has a bachelor's in education with a major in elementary education, a master's in education from Western Governors University with a major in mathematics education, 17 years experience with the Salem School District as a middle school math teacher. The recommendation would be to approve a transfer and new contract for Craig Ballou as a math interventionist to include 5 additional days for program support.
I move to approve a transfer and new contract for Craig Ballou as a math interventionist to include 5 additional days for program support.
So moved.
Second?
Does he have his administration license? Does he have plans to get it?
I think we've discussed that, but
And there's no pay change, just a shift?
no, not, our intervention positions follow the teacher scale.
Okay.
With the exception of the 5 extra days,
Additional
right?
days,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's just per diem kind of.
And have you started looking for his replacement?
So we will actually be transferring someone into that position.
Am I moving ahead?
And it does, well, because that is not a contract change, that is just a transfer. So Michael Sanchez will be moving into that position. But it doesn't require any kind of a contract change.
And
It'll be a
he's
transfer.
5th, 4th grade.
Well, remember, he had transferred up into the 8th grade English Language Arts. So the 8th grade English Language Arts is now open.
Okay. As long as you got that straight, that's good.
Did we move on that?
Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. That's very cool.
As I had recommended, we had held earlier this summer a special board retreat work session to address some upcoming facility needs. My recommendation would be for the board to consider setting another meeting to continue with that process of looking at and deciding next steps. As you're aware, the current operating referendum is non-recurring and ends with the 2021-22 school year. So this meeting would continue the discussion around the facilities report and future planning. No action would be taken at this meeting. So again, in that workshop format, I would recommend that the board consider setting that next date. If you would like, you can give me the autonomy to send out kind of like a survey again, like I did last time. And based on that information, establish a mutually agreeable date.
Like August 10th, perhaps.
Yeah, I was just.
I think let's let Connie send one of those fancy
Saying
invites
Tuesdays are
out.
nice.
By the
I
doodle.
like to keep.
Yeah, the
Tuesdays.
doodles. Yeah, the doodles are
No,
great.
I
Is it?
probably only got like one free one. I'll probably have to pay for the next one, but it might be worthwhile.
I can always create an account.
There you go. Just trying to marshal all the resources we have available.
It
But,
could come out of that $400 petty cash that never.
Yeah, right.
so I'm thinking somewhere in
my
that,
$400.
maybe in that second week of August, somewhere in there, sounding like that might,
Yeah, like maybe
as a
the
starting point.
Perhaps the 10th.
Perhaps the 10th.
Okay. What is unique about the 10th? Is that the Tuesday?
Dana just said she was free. That's all.
I'm available then.
Right. Well, I mean, you could make a motion this evening if that is a time that works.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm flexible.
I'd have my vote, but hypothetically.
Hypothetical vote, sure.
All right, so the next item on the agenda, since there was no action taken on the last item, would be the adoption of the 2021-2022 academic standards. This is a requirement under state statute that a board must adopt and then notify the community of the standards that they will be using to develop curriculum and instruction around at the various grade levels. So obviously you can see that the recommendation in our required annual notice, if the board approves, is that we would continue to follow the Wisconsin Academic Model Standards. You can see the websites there, but I would encourage anyone from the community to go to the Department of Public Instruction. There are the Wisconsin Model Academic Standards, and it is our expectation as a district that our staff uses those to build their curriculum and their instruction. I think that this has become a topic of much more interest lately as families kind of have conversations around, for example, critical race theory or gender identity and those types of issues. And so again, I would encourage families to visit these websites. You will find under social studies that the Wisconsin Model Academic Standards for Social Studies does not include critical race theory. I know there've been a lot of questions that have come up around that topic, but it is still, regardless, these are the standards that we as an administrative team are recommending that the board adopt. And the board is required to adopt and give notice of the academic standards on an annual basis. I think I gave you an actual copy of what that notice looks like. That copy will go on our website and provide that notice.
Motion? Anybody?
I move that we adopt the required annual notice of academic standards, Wisconsin Model Academic Standards, as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
So then the next item on the agenda is school fees, and there are some changes in here that the board may wish to consider or not. There are fees that we've dropped from the past, and there are fees that we have added that I believe existed in the past but may not have for some years. We are looking at the 4K half-day registration. Remember now our families have the option of choosing half-day or full-day. So that would remain the same, but we did increase the 4K full-day registration fee up to $30 because of the additional numbers and supplies that will go along with the additional days that they're here. 5K registration would remain the same. 6-8 registration would remain the same. Chromebook insurance for grades 3 through 8, and the reason we're talking about grades 3 through 8 is we will now have the capacity to be one-to-one from 3rd grade all the way up through 8th grade. What this Chromebook insurance does is a parent is required to opt out because we have had kind of circumstances where the Chromebook gets destroyed and then the parent will ask us at that time, can I purchase insurance at that time? So the answer to that is no. At the beginning of the year, parents are given the option of choosing to have insurance, which significantly covers the cost if something is broken or destroyed, but it is optional. In the past, we have required families to take that insurance, or not to actually pay a fee for Chromebooks, but that isn't what our recommendation is going forward because we do believe that that is an essential curriculum device for our students now. So we would not be charging them. However, it's an expensive textbook if it gets ruined. And I always equate it to, as a family, if you have your child as a textbook and it gets ruined, you're still responsible for covering the cost of that. But a Chromebook is pricey. So we do recommend that parents consider insurance on the Chromebook. You can see the cost for snack milk. That has gone up for obviously our 4K full day because they're now here more days. Well, actually, they're here less days.
Yep.
So it actually is down a little bit. Sorry about that. Our 4K half days here 5 days a week. We're recommending bringing back the sport fee of $25 per sport. We believe that that is a nominal fee for what amounts to the cost of coaches and buses, transportation, uniforms, all of sports officials, all of those things. So we're recommending that. And part of that is to, as we work with our community to try and figure out what we need for operating our academic primary programs, we love to be able to offer some of these other programs, but believe it's reasonable to ask for a nominal fee. And then the same with clubs. We're recommending a $10 per club fee because, again, the cost of hiring an advisor and materials and supplies. And all of this is also contingent upon students who may be eligible for free and reduced lunch can have those fees waived if they qualify. And one of the reasons this is important is if you look down below, we're incredibly lucky to be able to continue with a free lunch program for all of our students here at Salem. That does create some difficulties for us because much of your federal funding is tied to your free and reduced lunch population. So when you're providing free lunch for all of your students, many of our families may not fill out that form because they're already getting free lunch. That can have a significant impact on the amount of federal funding we get if our families don't choose to fill out the applications for free and reduced lunch. So that's why we're recommending that if a family qualifies for free and reduced lunch, we would waive registration fees, we would waive those sport fees, the club fees, for those families as an incentive then for families to consider filling out that form. Certainly, we're going to recommend that every family fills out the form just to see if they may qualify. They may not realize that they meet those qualifications for free and reduced lunch. But that's one of the reasons also why we're recommending some of these fees and then the ability to waive for students if they meet those qualifications. As you can see, we've also suggested that there would be a cap for families. So regardless of how many family members, regardless of how many sports or clubs, the maximum fee would be $150 for a family. Regardless of whether they're, even if they're not eligible for free and reduced lunch, that cap would exist. And as you can see, the breakfast and lunch prices at this point are free and will be for this school year. And then there's the additional cost for milk at 40 cents per carton.
Will it be the same setup with the bags, or will it go back to being a hot lunch?
It will revert back to being much more of a typical lunch. Yes.
Now, the only question I have that might be debatable, not that we have to, but I know one of our incentives is to create more enrollment in that 4K realm for our school district. Could it be a selling point if we eliminated 4K for both half-day and full-day registration fees as a marketing tool to try to, I know it's a nominal fee really, but at the end of the day, it's another feather in our cap to say that we don't charge for registration to have 4K students at our school.
The only thing that I would say to that is our goal is to make this a very enriching and involved experience and do a fair amount of field trips and that kind of thing with our students. And so the cost, that the offset fee is going to be pretty nominal compared to what some of the additional cost would be.
Sure.
So, and again, we've always charged the registration fee for the half day, so it's not a significant increase to go full day, whereas families who may have been looking at daycare to offset that half day would have paid significantly more than that also. Sure. So again, that would be the logic behind that, but I understand what you're saying.
I move to approve the student fees as presented.
So moved?
Second. Now.
Whoa.
Everybody did.
Everybody had seconds.
Check to Nick.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries.
So board policy changes. I'm going to try and work through these without
Read every
us being
single
here
word.
all evening. So we have three different types of, policies or administrative guidelines under review tonight. I want to direct any community members on our website. If you go to the block that says policies under review, you can find these two different ways. One, policies under review, you'll see the three different types that we're looking at this evening. The other is to go straight to the link for board policies, click in the little corner there, and it'll drop down to draft, and it'll pull up all these policies we're talking about as well under draft.
And these were discussed with the policy committee?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
all of them.
So the
What does that mean?
It's still going on.
Oh, I guess.
So we're going to be talking about three different types of policies under review. The first is actual board policy changes that are significant enough to require board approval. So I'm going to and there's a lot of them. I'm going to put up each page for a few seconds for you to take a look at them. You've had them. The board policy committee has looked at them and reviewed them. I'm going to go through each one, and if you have specific questions about them, you can see there's a little blurb that kind of talks about what the changes are for each. But I'm not going to speak to each unless the board would like me to, but I'm just going to kind of give an opportunity to read each page as we go through. These are the actual substantive board policy changes. Now, the other thing for anybody in the community who may be watching, tonight we're talking about first reading consideration. Any board policy substantive changes require a second reading as well. So let's say, for example, the board approves these. They'll come back next month for second reading, and the community has an opportunity to go in and take a look at any of these policies and the suggested changes in those policies. So we'll go through this first page. Moving on to the second page. Feel free to ask questions. Third page. Fourth page. Fifth. Sixth. Seventh. Eighth. Ninth. 10th. Okay. So those are all of the policies up for first reading. And again, remember the board would make a motion this evening to adopt those policy changes for first reading if the board chooses. And then all of these policies would come back at the next board meeting for second reading. So any questions or concerns? Okay.
I move to accept the policy updates for first reading consideration as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain, I don't know, abstain. Motion carries.
So the next set, based on Board Policy 0131, which are bylaws and policies, the district administrator is authorized to review and make technical corrections to policies that have already been adopted through normal rulemaking procedures. Technical corrections are those corrections to policy language or construction that do not reflect a policy decision or substantive consideration by the board, such as correction of a typographical or grammatical error, inclusion or correction of a statutory citation, renumbering of sections, combining of policies, or similar actions. The district administrator shall inform the board. So because this is a little bit different, in this case, I'll go through the same procedure. I'll put them up for a couple seconds each. I am asking the board to give me the authority to make those changes. Again, these are technical corrections. Again, anybody in the public can go to that draft policy and see what these policies are and what those technical corrections are. So as you can see at the bottom, the recommendation would be to allow the district administrator the authority to make technical corrections to board policy as presented.
I move to allow the district administrator the authority to make technical corrections to the board policy as presented.
So moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And motion carries.
And this last set of policies are administrative guidelines. Per our board policy, the board shall delegate to the district administrator the function of specifying required actions in designing the detailed arrangements under which the school will be operated. These detailed arrangements shall constitute the administrative guidelines governing the school, which are not inconsistent with statutes or regulations of the state board or the policies of this board. So as I read that, it gives me, administrative team, the authority to take your policies and then create administrative guidelines that are not inconsistent with those policies. So again, looking forward, there is no board action that would take place on this one. It's just giving you notice that these are changes that the administrative guidelines are being made to the administrative guidelines. Okay, any questions or concerns about the administrative guidelines? Okay, through that.
It's a lot easier than that was a nice way to do that.
I was trying to serve. So, a big topic, 2021-2022 employee handbook. Just to give you a little bit of history, the employee handbook from 2019-2020 was missing significant detail and guidance typical in a school district handbook. In taking a look at it, for example, through the WASB lens on on employee handbooks, there was a lot missing, which creates problems for employees and creates problems for the district. The employee handbook, just as a reminder, can be changed by board action at any time. So even if you approve an employee handbook and in September, something that the board feels needs to be changed, it can be changed by board action at that time. Okay? It does not require collective bargaining with the exception of establishing base wages. The employee handbook from 2020-2021 addressed specific changes required by the COVID-19 pandemic and changes approved at the May 2020 board meeting to include some leave changes, vacation changes, lunch break changes, bereavement leave, but the overall format remained the same. We were focused last year on getting school open, and so the employee handbook was one of those things that kind of got set on the shelf a little bit. But this summer, and after having kind of to work through it last year, our administrative team felt that there really needed to be a revamp of the handbook and to bring it into more compliance with some of the legalities of the employee handbooks. We received feedback from employees via an anonymous feedback loop. I did share that with all board members. The leadership team went through the handbook template, which came from WASB, and made necessary changes to reflect practice as it was in the district, legal requirements, and some of the recommendations from the administrative team. The board personnel committee went over the employee feedback and the administrative team recommendations at our personnel committee meeting. A draft was provided at the July board meeting for information, so that's this evening. I'm not asking the board to approve the employee handbook. I want to make sure our employees have an opportunity to look at it more carefully before the board actually goes through the approval process. And then looking forward, a draft will be provided to the board for approval at the August board meeting. So that would be when approval would occur. So what are the changes being recommended? So some of the significant changes include right front and center an employee acknowledgement that they've received the handbook and looked at it and are aware of the information. It will have clear legal and protocol language. This may seem intimidating to our staff in some ways because they may not be used to seeing all of that legal language. Much of it is tied to state statute regardless, so it's really not a big change. They're just not used to seeing it maybe in that format of the employee handbook. It does include an obligation to report any kind of criminal record that would occur. It requires an expectation of cooperation with district investigations. So if there is an incident, it is an expectation of employees to cooperate. Again, very typical of every other handbook out there, just things that maybe weren't in our other handbook. It allows for reasonable suspicion testing for things like drugs or alcohol. It delineates management rights. Again, very typical of a handbook. For example, the right to assign schedules, some of those aspects that are not subject to collective bargaining. Emergency leave is further defined. So what exactly does constitute emergency leave? Bereavement leave, the recommendation is expanded to include up to 5 days for a parent. Right now it's just at 3 days, and some of our staff had said that trying to deal with some of the legalities of a loss of a parent requires more than those 3 days, so it expands that. It opens up the timeline for use of bereavement days in the case of a spouse, parent, or child to be within that 6-month period. Sometimes there are things that come up beyond that week. Our former handbook only allowed the bereavement leave to be within that period of time. It creates a banked sick leave policy that would allow an employee to borrow up to 10 days from the next year in cases where they end up. An example might be a brand new teacher comes into the building, is sick more often because hasn't been interacting with kids, maybe has children themselves, and only has an opportunity to build up 10 days of sick leave. This would allow an employee to borrow from the next year up to 10 days. It can't go on forever. Then that following year, it will limit it to 1 per month. But it does allow that. And then it also allows that eligibility from an employee bank in case of catastrophic health condition of an employee, dependent, or spouse. So in other words, employees donate to the sick leave bank, and in case of a catastrophic health condition, an employee could be eligible for an additional 20 days from that bank. It defines termination differently, and this is important, to no longer include non-renewal due to reduction in force. So in other words, layoff, okay? So that was not clear in our former handbook. The reason the two are different is one consists of a property interest. In other words, my reputation is at stake if I'm terminated, whereas a layoff doesn't have that same level of property interest. So it defines termination differently. It exempts non-renewal from reduction in force from the grievance procedure. Again, under statute, the grievance procedure is for employee safety issues, termination, which this would not be, or in the case of discipline. It expands the selection for reduction criteria to include things like length of service. It allows performance as a criteria for reduction of force only if that employee is on an actual written improvement plan. So in other words, it can't be something that comes out of the blue. The employee has to have been noticed that there's a need to improve. It does not allow the employee to take a step or longevity increase if they are on a written and noticed plan of improvement. So in other words, the intent of that step is to say that you've had a successful year and you move up that step. if you're on a plan of improvement, you would not be able to move that step as an employee. It changes personal leave somewhat. It limits administrative staff to approve 4 certified employees and 2 hourly requests per day. There were definitely times this year where we were really short in terms of staff. And that creates difficulty for our educational program if we have multiple substitutes in the building, or I have to pull, for example, multiple pupil services staff to cover classrooms, then they're no longer available to provide support for students. Again, in this case, if it goes beyond that, there's still that appeal to a district administrator after that level's been reached. It actually raises the payout for personal days from $100 to $200 per day for contracted, and 80% of wage from hourly, so 60% to 80%, trying to give some more incentive not to use those days. It would allow employees to carry over 2 paid days to the following year, but still not to exceed the maximum of 5 in any given total year. Right now, it's 2 per year, 3 unpaid they can request. What this would do is it would shift it in a year to potentially be 4 paid and then 1 unpaid. It doesn't change the total, but it does kind of, if you have some event coming up and you want to shift it to that following year. They would no longer be used to extend an approved or scheduled vacation. So in other words, a week added on to spring break, a week added on to winter break, and may not be used on professional development days for contracted staff. Again, very strong feelings from the administrative team on that. You bring in a presenter, or you have plans to work collaboratively, and then staff would use personal days for those days, and that really gets in the way of the district being able to have a consistent message. It increases sick leave buyback on those 5 days from 100 to 200 per day and 80% for our hourly employees. It requires pre-approval for overtime and also allows supervisor approval of comp time for 1.5 times as it relates to overtime. A change for emergency school closings, and this is going to be important because the way in which we now have our early collaboration time reduced our school calendar by 2 days, which gives us less room in terms of making up for emergency days. So what this does is it allows for the first 2 days to be paid at regular rate, and then after that, board would have to approve waiving any additional days. Employees that are required to come in would be paid at 1.5 times instead of 2 times. So this would be like custodial, perhaps clerical, the minimum that you need to keep the building safe and functioning. There may be people who would be required to come in, and then the pay for that would be at 1.5 times.
Let me ask something about that though. Let's say we have custodial staff or maintenance staff that's required to come and do snow removal, which is a part of their standard kind of operating procedure, I guess you would say. Would they be coming in at that standard rate or would they be coming at the 1.5 as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now they come in at 2.
Oh, okay.
Right. So our recommendation would be to make it 1.5, just for those select that are required to keep the building operating. And then just a last note, there is no language in the handbook related to this, but one of the conversations has been related to some sort of a retirement payout. It is not uncommon for districts to create a per diem retirement payout for retiring staff. So working with legal counsel, and this is why you see like 4 stars on this, to make sure that whatever we're doing is legal. But working with legal counsel to provide a per diem sick emergency leave payment into a 403B over 1 to 5 years upon retirement, with possibility of a first-year payment as wages to figure into Wisconsin retirement formula. So again, subject to legal parameter, An example under this situation could be, let's say, for example, you have a staff member that has built up to 120 days. That's the maximum that you can build up. And they are maybe, for example, making the top on our scale, which wouldn't be impossible, $391 a day. That can reach into that $50,000 territory. You would pay, for example, $8,000 the first year as actual salary and wages, because that would be added into their Wisconsin retirement calculation, and then the remainder 4 years split into a 403B. You can no longer pay wages after that person is no longer employed by you, but you can make contributions to a 403B for up to 5 years.
You're amortizing it.
So,
over the course of 5 years.
yep. Now, again, 4 stars, working with legal counsel to make sure that that's accurate, but that is kind of the plan. Again, not a retirement plan per se, it's a payment per diem for remaining sick days, sick/emergency days that our employees may have. Presently, in a given year, we only allow employees to have 5 of those days bought back at $100 per day. So this is significantly more for staff than they're presently allowed. Our hope is that it also encourages staff not to use their sick leave. Obviously, if they're sick, they should use their sick leave, but our hope would be it creates an incentive not to use those days as well. So, a lot of changes. I'll be sharing this out with staff. The board won't be approving this handbook until next month. It's just for information this evening. But any questions I can answer for you. It's time to retire. Phew, done for you. Okay. All right.
All right, I
I don't
promise.
know why you've been talking all night long.
Yeah, if you want to start that 3-minute timer, I will keep it short. I'll keep
Tap you
it.
after a minute.
Down, Marquez, I mean, really.
So I just want to give you a brief update. So we're in the month of July. The fiscal year ended at the end of June. We're still kind of wrapping up things. Certain revenues are still coming in from grant claims, state aid payments that are delayed until July. We got some final property tax settlements coming in next month. So things are still trickling in, but I can narrow down 99.5% of the things that I've already booked them because I know what the amounts are. But we do have our audit coming up in a few weeks, August 9th through the 11th. So our team in the business office is working hard to get everything in order. I just want to acknowledge the work that Kelsey and Jade have done so far and will help do over the next couple weeks to make sure that it's a smooth audit. And then at the August board meeting, I will update you on how it went. And the auditors won't finalize the audit until later in the fall, at which point I'm not sure what the process is here, if they do a short presentation. It's what's been done in my previous districts, but we'll get to that. I haven't looked at that far ahead of what happens in the fall, but in addition to the audit, I just wanted to thank Nick for his input following the May board meeting. He encouraged me to go back and see if we could get a higher dividend rate, and we were able to go back and negotiate up to 20%. Still not quite where I think Nick wanted, but it's an increase from where we started initially. So
7%.
exactly. So
Yeah.
thank you, Nick.
Yep.
And then just kind of wanted to touch on a few points from the fiscal last 2020-2021 fiscal year budget. So we did finish the fiscal year with a positive Fund 10 balance. Like I said, we're still finalizing the exact amount, but we will be maintaining a district fund balance of 18%. And our board policy 6235 requires a minimum of 15%, so it's slightly above that. That will potentially come in handy if we do any borrowing in the future, as fund balance is one of the considerations that goes into determining what your interest rate will be. And then we will, or at least right now, we're planning on transferring approximately $1.8 million to our Fund 46 long-term capital improvement fund. And this large amount is due to the fact that COVID has delayed some of our building improvement projects, including elevator and roofing. And we just found out that the elevator's getting worked on in the next week or two. Actually, they just wrapped up the roof I think a couple days ago. There was, I don't know if you guys saw the equipment out there this past couple weeks. So some of those things that we would have done in the last fiscal year are actually getting done now in 21-22 fiscal year. So, and then I did want to point out that our food service, our Fund 50, also ended the year with a positive balance, which is a good thing. And that's mainly due to us participating in the summer food service program, which had a higher reimbursement rate per meal. Additionally, we were able to provide more meals because we included our community at large as well. We are participating in the seamless summer option next year, which is very similar to the summer food service program, and it does have that higher reimbursement rate. So hopefully we can end with a positive balance again next year, because that food service fund balance can be used towards purchasing larger equipment, things that really have a much higher price and cost associated with them. So Connie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, other than I think, again, I want to clarify that money that's going into Fund 46 was money that was given to the district to use for facility maintenance needs in the last referendum. The goal would have been to have tried to spend most of that out. We struggled a little bit even last year with some of that, trying to get contractors on board, shortages right now of different materials and things like that. So we do have an ability to put it in that Fund 46 and then take it out pretty rapidly to cover those costs. But as an accounting mechanism, that's why that transfer is occurring. But the money is still continuing to go and be dedicated to those facility maintenance project needs that were identified within both the facility study and communicated with the community in our last referendum.
Good report, Mark, because I like the fund balance.
Yeah, those are exciting.
Putting the fun in fund balance.
Whoa!
Okay.
Man, you travel with
That's a
Trevor.
stretch, Marquez.
You lost it.
I mean, fund balance, those of us in the business can have long conversations about having a large fund balance and the impact of that. And you always want that careful balance between taking the funds that you have and using them to support student learning, but also having funds then to address, facility maintenance needs and things like that. The negative aspect of putting money into the fund balance is, of course, then it's not state aided as a expenditure. So it's that careful balance, but we really felt in our conversation today that 18% is kind of that good mark. Probably not looking to go significantly beyond that, but also hoping to maintain it at that level. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right, committee reports. You have the minutes of the 7/13 Personnel Committee meeting, but we really talked about that pretty much tonight as it related to the handbook. And you also have the minutes of the Policy and Community Relations Committee, and we talked about that to an extensive degree for the various policies this evening also. Coming up at this point, aside from the fact that I've already requested the board consider setting a special board meeting, I don't have any recommendations for committee meetings. Our next regular board meeting will be at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. As we post the agenda for that, we'll be noticing the community of some of the changes and how we handle our board meetings going forward. But that's all I have this evening.
Fantastic. I move to adjourn the meeting at 8:44.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you.